It was Halloween night in 2014, and I was 15 back then. My parents weren't home because they were out of town celebrating Halloween with their friends and family. I was all alone at home and was starting to get bored, so I called my cousin Lee and asked him if he could come over to my place to stay the night so we could enjoy Halloween together by watching some scary movies. And luckily, he agreed. After around 15 minutes, I heard a knock on my door, and when I opened it, it was Liam. I told him to come inside and make himself comfortable. Before my parents left the house yesterday, they handed me a small box of candies for the children that were supposed to come trick-or-treating. All that day, I was busy handing out the candies to the children, and now it was finally 11 p.m., and all the children were home. I turned off all the lights outside my house to symbolize that I was no longer welcoming trick-or-treaters, and after that my cousin and I decided to watch a movie to pass the time. We also planned to play some video games after the movie. We ordered pizza and started watching the movie, and I heard a knock on the door. I thought that maybe it was the pizza delivery guy, but when I opened the door, there was no one. I thought that maybe some kids were trying to fool us. I yelled, "Hey, don't try to make a fool of us, we're not welcoming trick-or-treaters anymore." I closed the door after saying that and went back inside. My cousin asked me who it was, and I told him that it was just some kids that were knocking on the door. After 2 or 3 minutes, I heard another knock on my door, but this time no one was playing with us, because I heard someone say, "Trick or treat." Who would possibly come at this time to my house? There was no way that it could be children because their parents would never allow them to stay out this late. I opened the door only to see a man dressed in some cheap, scary costume with a clown mask on his face standing in front of me. I don't know why, but I was catching creepy vibes from the man, because he was too old to be trick-or-treating. I gawked at him and finally asked him, "Hey, did you knock on my door before, and aren't you a little old for this trick-or-treating thing?" But he didn't give me an answer. So I then said to him, "Bro, I wish I could help you, but I ran out of candy." This time he said, "Trick or treat." And after hearing his voice, I was sure he wasn't a teenager or a child. I told him, "I don't have any candies, so could you please go because I don't have time for this." He stared at me for some time, and then said it again, "Trick or treat." I was frustrated by his behavior, so I shut the door and told him to go. Otherwise, I would call the cops. After some time, I heard him saying something. "Choice is yours. Be afraid. Be very afraid from now on." I ignored him and went back to my cousin. I told him everything, but he didn't pay much attention, as he was busy watching the movie. I sat with him, and the movie was about to end. Suddenly, my cousin yelled at me, "Hey, look out the window!" I was terrified after I saw that 2 men covering their faces with the same clown mask and holding knives in their hands were peeking through the window. My cousin ran over and locked all the windows, and I ran to lock all the doors of my house. I peered through the peephole, and I was shocked when I saw that the clown was still there. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the sharpest knife. My cousin told me to call the cops, and we ran upstairs and locked ourselves in our room. I called the cops to complain about trespassing. I was on the call when I heard the sound of something smashing. At this time, I was trembling. Finally, someone answered the phone. I told them to come immediately because someone had broken into my house, and they told me to stay on the call until the police arrived. We could hear footsteps approaching upstairs. We were looking at each other's faces, and we could see our death standing behind the door, and those were the scariest 5 minutes of my life. Someone tried to turn the doorknob, and suddenly we heard the police sirens, and those men ran downstairs. We took a sigh of relief, and after a few seconds, we ran downstairs with the hope of seeing those clowns arrested by the police officers. But when we came inside the living room, none of them were out there. I told the officers they might have run away through the back door, and the officers tried to chase them, but found no one. I wasn't able to recognize their faces because they were wearing those masks all the time. Nothing was stolen from my home, and it was clear that they came for us when the police had gone. After that, the pizza boy had arrived. I don't know if it was because I was paranoid, but I noticed some creepy smile on his face. I didn't pay much attention to it, and he took the money from us and went away. My cousin opened the pizza box and found a note inside which said, "Be careful, we will come again." This freaked us out, so I called the manager of the pizza shop immediately and asked him about it, but all he said was that our pizza wasn't ready yet. This horrible incident happened to my friends and I when I was 11 years old and still studying in high school. I was very excited about Halloween night because it was my last trick-or-treat in the town where I lived with my school friends. My family was planning to move to another state next week, and I wanted to enjoy this Halloween by doing something adventurous, something that could make this night memorable. I told my parents that I would stay the night at my friend's James' house and would come back tomorrow, to which my parents agreed without any hesitation. They knew James and his family very well, and James was my classmate as well as my neighbor, so my parents had no particular reason to stop me from staying at his house. The next morning I went over to my friend's James' house, where my other friends were waiting for me to join them. We began trick-or-treating at midday, which was the perfect time for it because most of the families were welcoming children to grab candies from them. We started with our neighborhood, and by 10 p.m., We had collected a lot of candy. Everyone's bags were filled with candy except mine. Most of my friends had already gone to their homes except James and Harry, but I wanted to collect more candy. We tried on several houses, but no one had opened their doors. We decided to stop trick-or-treating and go back to James' house to play some card games. When we were on our way back, Harry saw a house and stopped us by saying, "Hey, stop, look at that house. I think we missed it." I wanted to collect as many candies as possible, so I said, "Yeah, we should try it out." When we got near the house, James stopped us and said, "Hey, I think we shouldn't stop because no one lives in this house." I was surprised and asked him, "How do you know that?" And James said, "My parents told me that a family used to live in this house about 2 years ago, and one day they got a divorce when their only child was killed by someone in this house. And after that, the husband shot himself 1 week after getting the divorce." We were listening to his story, and we started to believe him because there was no light in the house, and it looked like some abandoned house from a horror movie. But just then, we heard some sound like someone was running, and the sounds were coming from inside the house. I wasn't sure that there was someone in there, but we were foolish enough to go inside. We didn't have any flashlights with us, so we could not see what was going on in there. I asked James if he could go back to his house to bring us some flashlights, and he agreed. After 5 minutes, James returned, and we started exploring the house. The door was locked from the inside, and we became more convinced that someone was inside the house. I tried to open the back door, but we failed. The doorknob was broken, and there was something very heavy placed on the other side of the door. We eventually found some broken windows, and we jumped inside the house through that. After getting inside, we were surprised to see that there was a table placed on the back door by someone, so that no one could open it. And at this time, we were more scared because we knew that someone else was in the house. There was a very foul smell inside the house. James and I turned on the lights and saw that the bad smell was coming from the kitchen, so we immediately went to the living room. The living room floor was broken and produced a creaking sound when we walked on it, and it was giving us creepy vibes, and it seemed like we were actually inside some horror movie. We were exploring the house, and just then, Harry yelled, "Hey guys, come here, I found something!" We ran toward him and were shocked to see that there was a hole inside the ceiling. Harry told us that he heard some sounds coming from the ceiling, and he found that hole. I pointed my flashlight inside and got frozen to the ground when I saw that there was a child tied up by some ropes lying on the ceiling. It seemed like he was unconscious and very severely injured. James, who was watching all this, said to me, "Hey, someone is sitting in the corner." I pointed my flashlight and saw that there was another child. He was freaked out and scared. Tears were rolling down his cheeks, and he was whimpering and drifting away from us. I told him, "Hey buddy, we're not here to hurt you." But he didn't reply, and James went inside the ceiling to retrieve the child. I left my flashlight there and jumped outside the window. After a few seconds, I heard screams, and when I turned back, I saw that someone had grabbed Harry from his back and was trying to cover his mouth with his hands. I couldn't see his face as it was covered with a cloth. I ran to my neighbor's house as fast as I could, and someone opened the door. He looked at my face and offered me a glass of water. I refused and told him everything that happened there, and he immediately called the cops and explained the situation. After 2 minutes, the police arrived, and we went into that house. I showed them the way to the ceiling, and the police retrieved the children and my friends, who were also tied up with ropes. Harry told us that the man had escaped from the back door after tying them up. The police asked the child who was there before us what happened, and he told them that both of them were siblings and that 2 days ago, when they were returning from school, a man had kidnapped them. His older brother resisted, so the man hit him on the head, and he went unconscious. The police checked the nerves on the injured child, and luckily, he was alive. After rescuing them, they immediately informed their parents, and we went back to our homes to tell our parents about the incident. They were mad at us for doing such a stupid thing, but I was just happy that we got out of it alive. It was 2016, and I was 15 years old. I was with my cousin Jack, who was 17 years old. We were planning on trick-or-treating on the upcoming Halloween night. I was a little bit too old for trick-or-treating, but it didn't bother me as long as I was getting free candy. I planned to ride my bike over to Jack's house so we could trick-or-treat in his neighborhood, and then I would ride back home the next morning. Everything was on track until I arrived at Jack's house, and I was a bit surprised to see that I wasn't the only one who had been invited. There were a lot of Jack's friends and classmates waiting there for me. I didn't know any of them, and I met them for the first time as they were much older than me, but they were very friendly and nice. They were all dressed in scary costumes, and when I asked Jack if they were going to come trick-or-treating with us, he told me that he had planned something without telling me. He planned to go with his friends on a nearby hill at midnight to drink beer, and that's why they were dressed in scary costumes so that the police couldn't bust them. He also asked me if I wanted to drink some beer with them, which I politely refused, and he didn't insist much as I was too young for such things. Jack's friends went to the nearby hill at around 7 p.m., so Jack and I started trick-or-treating. Our bags were empty, and we wanted to fill them up before midnight so we could join Jack's friends. We knocked on many houses, and some gave us candy, but some refused by saying that their candies had already finished because there were many children trick-or-treating before us. At around 8 p.m., our bags were not even half filled. So Jack and I decided to knock on the doors where no one was knocking, the houses with no decorations, but we were dumb to do so. We didn't realize that it was a bad idea because houses with no decoration is just a signal to get lost or that they're not welcoming kids to trick-or-treat. After walking for some time, we found some more houses with no decoration, but their lights were on, so we decided to try our luck there. I knocked on the door 3 times, but no one opened it. My cousin stepped forward and he literally started punching at the door. After a few seconds, a boy around 24 or 25 opened the door. He looked very angry and started yelling at us. "Don't you love your lives? You knock on the door again, and I swear I'll kill you both." Jack stupidly replied to him, "Oh really? Come and try then." The boy was so pissed off at Jack's reply that he said, "You both will see me again soon," and he slammed the door in our faces. We ignored him and went to some other houses and hoped for some candy, and by 11 p.m. our bags were half filled. Jack said that we should stop now and go to the hills where his friends were waiting for him. I also agreed with him because most of the houses had already turned off their lights by 11 p.m., which was a clear signal for us that they were no longer welcoming children anymore. So we went to the hill and found Jack's friends after a few minutes. They were drinking beer and having fun, and we joined them. I was sitting in the corner eating some of my candy, but I wasn't enjoying myself. After some time, I noticed that Jack had disappeared, and when I asked one of his friends, he told me that he had gone up to pee, and as I mentioned before, I was a very dumb child, so I believed it. After a few minutes, one of Jack's friends came up to me and told me to go uphill so that I can bring them some more beer bottles. They had to hide the bottles because they were underage, so they stashed the bottles in the bushes in fear of being caught by the police. They gave me a flashlight and I went uphill to bring them some more beer. It was pitch black dark up there, but somehow with the help of the direction that they gave me, I found the box where the beer bottles were stashed. I picked up some bottles, and just then, I heard Jack's voice, "Hey, help me!" I looked in the direction of the voice, and I was shocked to see that someone was pulling Jack into the bushes. I wanted to help him, but I knew I couldn't do anything alone. I ran back to his friends and told them, "Hey, Jack needs help!" As soon as I told them what I just saw, they started laughing, and a boy stepped forward to me and said that they were playing a prank on me, and that Jack was involved in it. I took a sigh of relief and asked them about the boy who was pulling Jack into the bushes. All of a sudden, the laughing sound stopped and turned into a pin-drop silence. The boy told me that they only sent Jack to scare me, and they were all confused and looking at each other. We rushed uphill to the place where I saw Jack, but when we got there, no one was there. I was worried for Jack, and unfortunately a few minutes later, someone found him. But he was unconscious and heavily injured. His mouth was bleeding and he couldn't move. I was feeling guilty that I should have done something instead of running back to his friends. One of Jack's friends called the ambulance, and after 2 minutes, the ambulance arrived and our families also arrived at the hospital. The doctor told us that whoever attacked Jack had broken 2 of his bones and 3 of his ribs, which caused him to have internal bleeding. One day later, when Jack regained consciousness, he told us that the same boy who threatened us on Halloween night had followed us and attacked him when he was trying to prank me. When police investigated the matter very seriously, they found out that the boy who attacked Jack was a drug addict and he was also suffering from some mental conditions. After that incident, my parents never allowed me to go trick-or-treating on Halloween ever again.